Today, on The Angry Catholic Show, we're going to tackle If You Would Just Lock the Door. Our angry item of the day is a defense of Monsignor Grinder and Sons of St. Joseph. Welcome. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Joseph Sciambra. Back in 2002, we were all told by the bishops that they were going to fix the abuse problem in the church. Well, in 2013, a priest that our family was close with was arrested in a car with a 15-year-old boy. And last year, Ed Locke, the music director of St. Nicholas Parish in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was caught on video and text luring what he thought was a 15-year-old boy to his house at midnight. And our bishop never told the parishioners why he was removed from ministry. Last October, Father Lockney, who was the first seminarian Bishop Bambera ever ordained to the priesthood, was arrested for luring 2 minor boys to his house. Other than a general statement from the diocese, crickets. But the bishops continue to assure us that they've taken care of the problem. And yet none of the bishops are investigating how this happened and continues to happen. Today, sexual abuse survivors are being re-abused by diocesan authorities who ignore and stonewall those seeking justice. If Catholics don't speak up and get involved, the message from a few can continue to be ignored by the bishops. So here we go. So I want to thank Joseph Sciambra for joining us. I really appreciate you spending some time out of your busy day with us.
Oh, no, I'm thankful to be here. God bless you both.
Now, those that don't know, Joseph Sciambra has written extensively concerning the real-life issues of pornography, homosexuality, and the occult. His articles have been published in LifeSite News, The Stream, First Things, Church Militant. He received a BA from the University of California at Berkeley in art history and his MA from Sonoma State University. You can get his book, Disordered. You can get the Kindle version on Amazon and the soft cover at josephsciambra.com. So for our first segment, we came in at If You Had Just Locked the Door, and we'll get into the actual details of how we came up with that hook. But to get us started, one of the reasons I reached out and called you recently, Joseph, to if you would be willing to join us was I just was seeing all this social media, the comments, and these are comments I'm talking about actually from Catholics. And I was just thinking that, but before we give survivors of abuse by the church all the reasons why they should be back in the church, it would be nice if some of us Catholics or some of those Catholics that make these comments would put the same amount of effort into fixing the things in the church, or maybe calling out their own bishop for the behavior, or maybe spending a little time educating themselves about what actually is going on in the church. So that's kind of how I wanted to, to get started here.
I kind of wonder, to try to answer or add something to that comment, I wonder who the type of Catholic that I interact with on social media. And I'm assuming it's a more traditional Catholic, a more small O Orthodox Catholic, because, I usually typically don't interact with, let's say, the Catholics that follow James Martin. So, I would be more likely to interact with Catholics who would follow, Cardinal Burke, or somebody like that. I don't even know if Cardinal Burke has a social media presence, does he? I don't even know.
I don't think so, but I don't know. Okay. I don't think so.
No, I think mostly
Sarah,
other people
does.
Share his articles or what he says.
Yeah. So, what I've noticed that, I try to get in the psychology of people's heads sometimes, but that was the headspace I was in too, because I think a lot of more conservative Catholics have probably experienced at least a degree of trauma in the church. And what I mean by trauma, I don't necessarily mean that it rises to the level of abuse, but just in terms of trauma of being, how would I put it, being unsure of their faith or having times in their life where they were very unhappy being a Catholic, or doubting the faith, or I think they have seen the abuse in the church, maybe not firsthand, but they've certainly seen it in the media, so they're aware that there's something wrong. And I think that's why those people a lot of times will turn towards the traditional Latin Mass and those sort of communities, because I did that too, because at least there they have some surety, or they have some confidence that maybe something of the Catholic Church, maybe that like it used to be, or at least like they imagine it used to being, is still alive and is still there. So they hold on to that. And I think when they see someone like me or somebody else that might be critical, not necessarily an abuse survivor, but somebody that might be just looking for the church or the bishops or the clergy to take some accountability for what's gone wrong, I think they immediately react. They kind of have a bunker mentality where, they're not charitable, and they react pretty strongly to somebody because they see that as an attack, not so much on maybe the church as a whole, but because I think they'll even criticize like someone like Pope Francis, but somebody like Kupich or Gregory or James Martin. They're comfortable criticizing somebody like that. But if the criticism starts hitting too close to home, then I think they get uncomfortable, and then they'll attack you personally. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think they're very protective of what, and I was that way too, which is weird because I experienced. I don't want to say the word. Well, it was abusive. I experienced some abusive situations in like conservative Catholicism or the traditional Latin Mass, and I wouldn't speak about it for years because I felt like I had to protect this little enclave of truth and real Catholicism, no matter what. So, that's very unhealthy. That's what I did, and I didn't want to speak about it. So I think a lot of people that have been pushed into that corner will defend it. I think that's a really toxic environment, because I think when you want to defend something so strongly like that, I think you'll overlook a lot of things. And some journalists have done, at Church Militant, they've done some good work on some traditional, communities, and they've shown that, no, they're not this picture of 1950s Catholicism. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was not raised a cradle Catholic. I came in as a convert.
Right.
And I converted when I was 18, and then I walked on Villanova University's campus.
Wow.
And was immediately, I guess, in an adversarial position with the Augustinians. They would do things that I'm like, oh, this seems a little off, or they're saying something off. And I was very pro-life, and there wasn't a lot of support on the campus. So I've never been myself, my experience as a Catholic, I've never been in the in crowd or rallied around something necessarily, because there wasn't something like that for me. But I can see how we do seem to want to rally around like bishops or priests. In our diocese, we'll say this is a good bishop, or this is a good priest, or this is one of the good ones, and some of that's just human nature. I think at the end of the day, these different scandals and what's happened after 2018, when I know myself as a Catholic, started diving in, I just wanted to know the truth. I just wanted to know all of it. You start to realize we're called to care about those who are vulnerable, care about those who've been hurt. And we're called to try to make the church a place that doesn't hurt people. And that doesn't simply mean have, 30,000 people trained doing Virtus and have these programs and just move on. It means like having a place where people can go on Sunday and not feel that they don't matter, and not be constantly ignored or kind of told like this isn't happening anymore, or you don't know, or like it's, and that's what I see is happening now. Is there's a lot of gaslighting going on. It seems if you happen to be, because you brought up Cardinal Burke. You know what? Cardinal Burke was in St. Louis, and St. Louis has a lot of corruption and has a whole lot of issues there, and had a whole lot of abuse and a whole lot of cover up. And I'm not saying he covered up. I don't know, but I really don't appreciate him being silent about this. And I know he's, I know he's supposed to be someone we're not supposed to criticize, but honestly, for the sake of his soul and for all those people who've been treated so horrifically and have a right to the truth, we should be demanding, solid Orthodox Catholics that have relationships with him should be demanding that he come clean about what he knows, right?
I agree. Boy, that was a lot that you said. I think talking about, because you talked about hero worship, and that's something that I think eventually turned me off of Catholicism. I wonder if it doesn't go back to the reverence, this extreme reverence we have for the Pope. And then everything kind of downstream. You've got bishop worship and then priest worship. And I mean, I definitely see that too in more traditional communities where they talk about, like good bishops, like Bishop Sample in Portland or Bishop Corleone. And those two I've actually looked at more closely, especially because I'm so close geographically to them, is that they have some major problems in their diocese. Specifically, the only one that I really look at in depth is the LGBTQ one. And they have, it's weird because I've tried to point it out, and Catholics will kind of, I don't know, they just kind of slough it off and say, well, they're not perfect. They live in a difficult diocese. Well, yeah, I get that. But shouldn't they be trying to do something? Mm-hmm. And then, it's a bad idea to worship a bishop because you guys will know this. I'm old enough to remember when Bishop Timlin in Scranton was very highly regarded in the traditional communities. The SSPX was headquartered there, and then the community that I later went and worked for was headquartered there. And at that time, in 1999, if, Bishop Timlin, who I really respected, if he had given this group an imprimatur, I was like, well, then they must be good. To my surprise, they weren't. Also with Cardinal Burke, I've met him, and I did talk with him. I had about a half-hour meeting with him a few years ago that a friend of mine, Austin Ruse, had set up. I don't know what to say. He's a good man. I think he's a sincere man. I think he cares. But what can he do? The Catholic Church is just so enormous. He looked like a man to me that was just carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and I was like just putting another pound on, And I felt bad, but yeah. I think the challenge that he has, I think that a lot of parish priests have, is kind of like, what do I say? What hill am I going to die on? I guess he figured, because I've had these conversations with priests, and every priest pretty much that I've talked to knows about the funky things that go on in their diocese that they're not cool with, but they're kind of like, well, what do I do? If I stand up and I make noises about it, even privately, because I've known priests that have done that, not even gone public, but just between them and their bishop, they're going to have problems. So I guess Cardinal Burke on a much wider scale has had to debate that in his own head. Is like, how much? I mean, look at Vigano. I mean, he just put it all out there.
But I just don't see how, because we frequently hear the term new evangelization and evangelize, and that's the programs that we hear spoken about, at least in our diocese and others. I just don't see how they can expect to not keep losing Catholics, though, in regard to like what battle are we going to fight? Well, if we don't at least address the issue head on, and start to clean it up. I just don't see how you can be all gung ho with this evangelization when the elephant's sitting there in the room. It's like, no, we have real problems, and you got to clean this out.
Well, Bishop Robert Barron, in his book, I can't remember what stupid book it was, but he laid it out in that book. He said the pelvic issues, we're losing on those. So he just said, let's not address them. So I guess they're just doing social justice right now, which is immigration. I don't know what would be some of the other ones, the poverty.
Yeah, a lot of it's immigration because they get a lot of money for it.
Well, exactly. That's why I mentioned that one first, because, they're very vocal on that, but not on any other social. Well, I mean, I should say abortion. I would say they are, but because abortion isn't one that hits close to home, because priests don't have abortions, and I don't think they have girlfriends that need an abortion. But
in the Diocese of Scranton, unfortunately, we had that.
Oh, you're serious?
No, Bishop Timlin. It was in the grand jury report, and there was a priest, and he took advantage of a young girl, and then paid for her abortion. And then Bishop Timlin didn't care about the girl, but wrote to the priest when he was going to be out of the priesthood, and tried to lobby for him, and said, "I know you've had a rough year." All while he's sitting at a pro-life breakfast every year, giving.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, this is what we're dealing with. I think of this Fulton Sheen story of I'm sure we've all heard it. This little girl who is in a Catholic church in China, and the communists have gone in, the soldiers, and they threw open the tabernacle. And every day she would go in when the soldiers were sleeping, and she would receive one consecrated host and receive our Lord on her knees. And when she was almost done, had received every night, risking her life, one of the soldiers woke up and killed her. And Bishop Fulton Sheen was showing the great devotion she had. And I think as faithful Catholics, we can sometimes think like it's the Eucharist, and we want that devotion, and we want that love, and nobody should leave. And I agree. I agree. These are the sacraments, and they're so important, and this is Christ's church. But what we're forgetting is the little girl every time she went in wasn't going in to get raped by the soldiers every time, because would we send her back in if she was going to be hurt like that? Would we have sent her in, and would that be as beautiful a story if she was getting beat up every time she went in? And then we have to remember those soldiers were occupiers in that church. And I think as Catholics, we have to start naming, or at least working to stop people who are occupying this church and hurting our fellow Catholics, and work towards that so that we can send people back in the church, and they're not going to be hurt emotionally and spiritually.
You get it. Yeah, you get it. That's it. You understand. I would say I don't want to say all, because that's so final, but I should say the vast majority of survivors that I know have either left the church, or they still regard themselves as Roman Catholic, but they don't go to church. They don't go.
Yeah, and how can we expect survivors to engage or re-engage with the church when our bishops are treating the families and survivors awfully? I mean, I'll just go down just a couple here before we finish up the segment. Bishop Deschotel literally had his attorneys. He allowed I don't know if he had them, but he allowed his attorneys to discredit the Paytons when their son was abused by their pastor, and they said it was their fault for letting him spend time with their pastor.
Even though he was the deacon.
Right. And he was the
Payton
deacon.
was the deacon under the pastor.
Right. But just that they would do that. Bishop Grosch told Father Richard up in the Buffalo Diocese, if he had just locked the door, that wouldn't have happened. Like it's his fault.
That he was assaulted, yep.
Yeah. Bishop Sticka, I think this is actually more recent, had said the assault, now this is an actual assault, was baseless boundary issues. I mean, this is a bishop saying this. A friend of ours, Chris O'Leary, was told by Cardinal Dolan that his abuse wasn't possible. like right to him. It was on the phone, but he told that to him.
Even though there's
Wasn't
now
even possible.
multiple victims of Father Valentine.
And even the Holy Father, I think it was in 2018, he had accused the Chilean sex abuse victims of slander. And then he had to actually go back on that because he had made grave error. So he actually had to recant what he had said in 2018. But just the fact that he would come out and say that when he didn't know what he was talking about, I mean, how can you expect a survivor to come back and engage in this church when that's the behavior of our bishops? You can listen to us on KCRD-FM, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Google Play, and Spotify, and find us, as always, at theangrycatholic.com. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Joseph Sciambra. So for our angry item of the day, we came in with a defense of Monsignor Grinder. And I don't know, Father Martin comes up semi-often. And it seems like he literally came out when the whole Monsignor Grinder, it was Monsignor Burrell, right? That was his name, and he was the secretary for the USCCB. I think if I remember reading right, he literally is one of the highest ranking priests in the nation at that position, and he was. Everybody probably knows most of this story. He was caught on Grindr app. And they got the data. I believe it was Pillar, I think, reported that, right?
Yes. And they found all the data. They
found all the data. And, I mean, he was, like, literally hundreds of dates. And
throughout the week, like, lots throughout the week. Like, it was...
Oh, yeah. This was a huge story. But Father Martin comes out, and the people that were in opposition to this, I believe, he was on Twitter going after them, calling them homophobic. This guy's a Monsignor, and he's out there, going crazy on this Grindr app,
trolling.
Right, and Father Martin is bashing the critics that they're homophobic. It just doesn't even make sense.
He went after
to me.
Pillar. He went after Pillar, and then he said they're trying to conflate homosexuality with pedophilia and all this other stuff. And what it comes down to, there have been reports of kids as young as 13. On Grindr. You're supposed to be 18, but they do nothing to verify your age. So it is absolutely plausible that Monsignor Burrell, one of his hookups, could have been under the age of 18. I mean, it is plausible.
Well, we know that's the intent because we know in our own diocese, we know Locke and Lockney, they were looking for 15-year-olds.
Yeah. Well, and even if someone was 18 or 19, the point of it is whether the sexual behavior is homosexual in nature or heterosexual in nature, going on an app and having multiple anonymous hookups, lots of them every week, again and again and again and again, is disordered behavior. And it's predatory behavior. It's not behavior. It's objectifying people. It's going after people. I don't know why this Father Martin had to go to his homophobic card and not just see this as it's just disordered concerning behavior for a priest, right?
Well, Paul said that James Martin, came out in defense of this Monsignor. He hasn't come out. That's the problem, because he's stated, and I've mentioned this to him on social media. He has made statements like, "Okay, young people should be open and honest about the way God made them." But when Martin was asked by a journalist who works at a gay periodical here in San Francisco, and God bless this journalist, this guy, he asked him, he said, could you comment about your sexual orientation? And Martin said, no, I don't want to comment. So, I mean, that burns me. That's really hypocritical, because he's asking other people to come out as gay or lesbian or transgender or bisexual. but he won't do it. He won't do it. So, he's playing a game here. I don't know what kind of game he's playing, whether he's trying to, affirm his identity in the church, but he's using other people to do it. I don't like that. There was a Jesuit in the 70s and early 80s, John J. McNeil, who's famous, or was famous at the time. He was on Donahue and a bunch of different secular programs. And, he was pushing for the same kind of agenda that Martin is. But at least John J. McNeil eventually came out and talked about his own orientation and his own objectives. Martin won't do it. So he's using other people. I don't like that. I don't like it. If he's got a case to make it.
Right.
But don't make it through other people.
And what message is that sending these teens he's working with?
I don't know. I don't like it. I think there's something very nefarious involved in all of this, because this is probably when I had the breaking point with the Catholic Church and I said I'm done. It was I think it was 2018. But I'd gone to the LA Rec, and people kind of make fun of me because I talk about the LA Rec as if it's something consequential. But it is, because I think everything's downstream, at least in the American church, from the LA Rec. And I saw this stuff there 4 years ago where they were talking about sexual orientation in children, gender identity in children. Second and third graders know their sexual orientation. They know their gender identity. And Catholic teachers, priests, nuns, whatever, sisters, DREs, CCD teachers, need to recognize this in kids and confirm it. And, I thought this is very sick. This is grooming. And, and then this year I've actually had parents that have their kids in Catholic schools and say, this is going on. And I go, well, it took a few years, but like I said, this stuff is, it'll eventually... It doesn't stay at the LA Rec. It doesn't stay in the Jesuits or the Paulists. It eventually ends up in your parish. And then what do I do? What do I do? Because then my kids are being groomed. My kids are being brainwashed.
Sure. When this whole thing with Monsignor Burrell came out, Father James Martin put up on his Twitter a New Ways Ministry article.
Ugh.
And in that article, New Ways Ministry called Monsignor Burrell a victim. He was the one who's doing all the grinder stuff, but he was a victim. And they claimed that the institutional church bears more responsibility for his actions than he does, because he had to keep who he was hidden. And it seemed as if New Ways Ministry and Father James Martin, by putting this out there, saw these frequent hookups with anonymous young men is just a slip up that happened like 5 days a week. It's like they're unable to understand that this behavior is not an expression of repressed sexuality. Like, it's predatory. Like, this is predatory, disordered behavior. And it would be predatory and disordered in a heterosexual man as well as a homosexual man. Like, I don't know why, for some reason, James Martin and New Ways sees this just as, this is what happens when you don't get to come out. No one is made to just sleep around every day of the week with different people.
I think, Chris, too, is that this I kind of call them the cocktail hour Catholics, or the cocktail party Catholics. You saw this in, I think they showed it really well in Spotlight, the movie, where there were just these very wealthy Catholics getting together, very educated with the bishop and hobnobbing. They have a very sort of circumscribed, I think, perception or view of what homosexuality is, especially, let's say, gay urban male homosexuality. They don't get it. They don't get it. They think it's the white picket fence. They don't understand. They don't understand at all. I think they do have a conception that, I don't know, it's weird. It's kind of a very bourgeois, domesticated view of homosexuality. And I think maybe instinctually they understand it, but that's not, but they would never publicly admit that, the gay experiment, especially with men, is pretty out of control. I learned that firsthand during the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, and
they don't get it. They don't get it.
Yeah, and I just don't see how his supervisor can allow this guy to continue to work with teens. I mean, ultimately.
Well, because they do it.
Right, but his supervisor ultimately is on the hook for this. If you're concerned about these issues, it's very important for us to share this information. Chris and I, along with a group of supporters, publish this show and ask for your help by sharing it. You can email it, post it on social media, text it, or just tell somebody about it. You can be sure if you don't, then nothing will change. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Joseph Sciambra. So for our final segment, we came in with Sons of St. Joseph, and that just happens to be the name of Joseph Sciambra's blog. And you can find that at josephsciambra.com, and also you can get his book either on Kindle for the digital version or the soft cover at josephsciambra.com. But to get started, Joseph, I just wanted you, if you could share with us a little bit, because you've had a very interesting journey, to say the least. And if we could kind of maybe start where, how many years ago was it when you started to come back to the Catholic Church and you were on a mission? I mean, you were on a mission to help and make changes and help others. And recently you found some peace. So if you could kind of maybe share a little bit about when you came back to the Catholic Church and then this peace you found recently.
Sure. Yeah, 1999, I came back to the church. That was after being in the gay male community for 12 years. And that had been pretty intense and pretty hardcore. So when I came back, I didn't really come back to the church. I got out of that first. And then I did, a lot of people that hit rock bottom, they have that sort of come to Jesus moment. And I did. And I had been raised Catholic here in San Francisco, but pretty marginal. I'm not blaming my parents. It's just the church was kooky in the 70s and the 80s. So I never had much of an interest in it and didn't like it and had left. But it was just kind of what was familiar to me. And I did come back to the church and met some gnarly priests that were pretty abusive, and then, met some good ones too. It's a mixed bag in the church. I'm not dumping on the whole church like it's all full of pedos, but it's just a mixed bag. There's some really good priests in there, and there's some really good people, but there's some really sick, vicious ones too. And it's hard to navigate. Here it was, because I hit both both of them. Anyway, so I ended up at the TLM, the Traditional Latin Mass, which was like a salvation to me. It felt good. It felt pretty safe. Had some bad experiences there too. It's just stuck it out for years, and I never came back to Catholicism looking to be like reform the church or change anything or help people. I just kind of wanted to get right. But then I did, because I kind of started talking about it, and then people just started reaching out to me with their own stories and their own experiences of really not good in the church, and my heart went out to them, and I just started getting more into it. And, the church is a top-down organization. You don't vote. Well, you vote with your feet and you vote with your dollar. That's about it. Mm-hmm. So, I started talking to bishops and a Cardinal Burke. It's tough. I finally realized that I wasn't changing the church. The church was just changing me, and I was getting very angry and had a lot of hatred in me. And it was starting to affect my relationship with our Lord. And I was like, you know what? I got to get out. I can't take it anymore. I got to get out, because I'm going to lose my faith. I'm not only going to lose my mind, I'm going to lose my faith. And I started going to, I'd always been interested in Orthodoxy, especially Russian Orthodoxy, because I'd been familiar with Father Seraphim Rose, who I don't know who people know about. He's kind of a character. He's a California native, and he spent a lot of his adulthood in San Francisco, and kind of got into everything. He was a lot like me. I could relate to him. He was a prodigal son. Got into a lot of weird scenes, and then had a conversion to Russian Orthodoxy. And I kind of felt like he was guiding me a lot. I like the Orthodox Church. The priests are married. They seem more grounded. There seems less drama. There's less psychosis. I don't know. It's a different atmosphere than Roman Catholicism. There's less scandal. Not that it's perfect, but I don't think the abuse has been institutionalized like it has been in Catholicism, in the seminary process, and in the gaslighting, and even in the laity in terms of keeping people in line. It's just different. I like it. So
I guess I can understand in some ways. I think it's becoming hard sometimes to be a Catholic and to get up and go to Mass. For years, my children, we've always homeschooled, and we didn't have them do CCD, for instance, because we just taught the religion at home. And one year, I decided to teach CCD, and the kids did it with me. And we had always gotten up and went to Mass on Sundays and enjoyed it, and it was a thing. And then that Sunday, that year that we decided, I'll teach CCD, you guys will go. We started dreading Sundays. We were resentful. Because you're getting up early before you even go to Mass to go. And I'm thinking to myself, why are we creating, I'm not saying you shouldn't get up early for the Lord, but like, am I creating in my children this resentment already right before we even go to Mass? And Sunday becomes this like early morning, get out of bed thing. Like, why am I starting this? It's like I'm creating, in a sense, an obstacle before they really have this personal relationship with the Lord, an obstacle to them getting to that, And so we only lasted a year, and then we went back to just teaching our kids at home and doing that. But it made me think, and it was a good thing for me to learn, like to try to not have all sorts of obstacles. And even me as a mom, on a Sundays, we're getting out the door to try to have enough of my act together so that Mass is not something that mother's screaming and yelling and mom and dad are irritated and we're getting out the door, and like these little things. And so then on a big level, I feel like where we are right now as Catholics, and we have to just be honest about it, is it's like are creating and allowing a bunch of obstacles and a bunch of resentment to be built up that doesn't have to be there. This isn't like, pick up your cross, just pick up your cross. Like, everybody has lots of crosses just because of humanity. Having my bishop cover up and then exploit and not be honest, that's not my cross. Like that I can't believe that is like, okay, Kristen, your vocation as a wife and mother, and that's going to be your cross. Like, I've got 7 kids and a husband. I've got a cross. I love you. You're not a cross. I didn't mean it like that, but I didn't mean it like that. You're my sunshine to my cross. Like, I think as faithful Catholics, we have to kind of try to separate and distill and stop trying to make our complicity in this some form of piety. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does, because I think what you're saying is that in your own life, you have enough to deal with. But because families, are difficult and relationships are hard. And it's kind of like church, you kind of want it to be an oasis of sanity. It's supposed to bring us closer to God, and it's supposed to bring us peace. But it wasn't for me. The church was just a source of torment. And and then I had to figure out, what am I doing? I'm not growing closer to God. All I'm ever involved in is politics and abuse and scandal. That's it. And you kind of look on social media, because now I'm kind of looking at it from the outside. I feel so bad for Catholics on social media, because it's all it is. It's abuse, scandal, and outrage. That's all it is. I don't hear anybody talk about our Lord. I don't see people talk about spirituality unless they've really got their head in their sand. And there's some of those professional Catholics out there that'll, post pretty pictures and quotes from the saints, which is cool. You should do that. But it seems kind of disconnected if you do that in the Catholic Church at this point.
Well, Joseph, when you've taken, I know you know this because I'm sure your Orthodox Mass is beautiful. I'm sure between the liturgy and the music and the incense and like all the physical aspects of the Mass.
No freak show, never.
Right. But we don't have that. Well, not everybody, but most Catholics, the majority of Catholics don't have that. You'd said oasis. They don't like. I just know from. I would so look forward to going to the Bronx for Easter Vigil Mass because it was that oasis. It was like everybody there believed what was going on, and with the chanting and the incense and the music and the candles and all the scripture readings, it was literally an oasis. And it was this, I called it our yearly recharge. That was our recharge. Let's get up to the Bronx, let's go to this Mass, and we just came back all recharged and really focused on our Lord. I think you're nailing it because that we don't have that. We don't have that each week. We don't get to really immerse ourselves in worship because we're listening to the ding-a-ding-a-ding-a-dang-ding-ding, the piano and this, and it's like, what the heck is? It's more distracting than if anything. Just get rid of all the music.
Yeah,
just say it.
Conservative Catholic would tell you just go find a TLM. That's what they do.
Yeah, no, but and this is the point. You're saying oasis, and words matter. Right now, do we have an oasis? We should be able to have an oasis. You're right. And reverent liturgy and real worship can be that. But if we don't address the scandals and the problems that exist in all of these liturgies and in all of these wings of the church, then there isn't an oasis. It's an escape. And that's not healthy.
That's what I just, as sincere as those people are that go to the TLM, and as good as a lot of the priests are, it felt like I was in exile within the church. But I think it's been proven under Francis is that you're still under the thumb of a corrupt organization. They can still pull the plug, and you're still under the bishop, and they can pull the plug. It wasn't good. It just wasn't good. I didn't like it. And there's a certain mentality that tends to develop, I think, in those enclaves. And I think it's rife for abuse because, like I said about my own abuse in the TLM, you want to protect it. Because if you lose that, what do you have? You're out of the church, essentially, unless I see a lot of people on social media now, I shouldn't say a lot, but a number of Catholics, talking about the SSPX. And I mean, I think Church Militant lifted the veil on that.
Yeah.
And I know some of the people personally that have been involved in abuse in the SSPX, and it's true. It's true. So, you have nowhere else to go. I mean, I kind of reached that after 20 years. I kind of was like, you know what? I have nowhere else to run in the Catholic Church except out. And that's what I did. So it sounds kind of final, but it is what it is. And I have some peace now. So
that's so sad that's the state of the church right now.
People run. I see it in the Novus Order where people just run to priests. They'll switch parishes. The priest is here, then they run to another one. And I'm like in my head looking at it from the outside. I said, this is not a good religion where people are just running after priests that are rational, and it can't sustain itself. This is not good.
I don't know. We just always get pulled back into we're supposed to be in our neighborhood, in our community, worshiping with Christ on that altar. And trust me, sometimes it's not easy, but we always get pulled back to that. And I know you've had a lot of criticism, and you've had some really solid, faithful Catholics not be very kind to you as you're finding your peace in orthodoxy. But what amazes me is that I don't know why the outrage or the anger or the aggressiveness is against you. It really should be towards the people in the hierarchy and in the chanceries that turn the other cheek, and just against that institution.
I really think that's it.
Like that's who the anger and the disappointment should be geared towards.
Like, have these people that would comment in that way, have they lifted a finger? Have they done anything? And because, I mean, it doesn't take long. You can spend just a few minutes online to see the kind of disaster that is facing us. What are they doing about it? Like, how can you expect for this to change? And I'm so tired of hearing, well, God's going to fix it. Well, of course God's going to fix it. But that doesn't give us a license to just crawl in our hole and do nothing. Like, we need to confront these bishops.
Catholics kind of reconcile that dilemma that you guys are grappling with. I've seen it by saying, well, so-and-so is self-excommunicated. Therefore, you weren't abused by the church. You were abused by this self-excommunicated outlier. And it's a really weird way to rationalize it by saying that's not the church. The Catholic Church is pure, spotless bride of Christ, which I'm not going to comment on, but that's how they do it. That's how they do it in their head. That, I don't know, it's a weird bifurcation of there's no responsibility, there's no accountability.
And they can, I agree, pure, spotless bride of Christ. So everybody should start acting like it. And we should be really upset that the pure, spotless bride of Christ is being so defiled, right?
I agree, but I go a little further. I think there's something institutionally wrong with the Catholic Church, but I think those bishops and those priests are part of the church. I don't think you can say that the abuse that is taking place in the Catholic Church is separate from the Catholic Church.
I think at this point you're right, because you can sit there as theologically, I guess, and draw all these distinctions and what's the church and look at the blah, 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 but at the end of the day, I had a family member who was really struggling with health and different things, living in a different state, and was had not been really raised Catholic, but had been baptized, and I didn't feel comfortable where I would have 10 years ago calling local priests and getting that priest to help my family, because they were in a very vulnerable position and there were young children, and I couldn't be confident that the bishop, that the chancery, and that priest, somebody wouldn't take advantage. And I thought, we're at a position that I can't give the comfort and the peace to my family. Like, something has to change. And it needs to be Catholics and the establishment class of Catholics and the wealthy Catholics and the movers and shakers need to wake up and put your money where your mouth is and stop giving a dime to this church.
Thank you for listening to The Angry Catholic Show. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't forget to share the show any way you can. I want to thank all the listeners who sent emails this week. Thank you, Chris. And a special thanks to Joseph Sciambra, who you can find at josephsciambra.com. Stay active, stay alert, and stay angry.
This has been a production of Dumb Ox Media Inc. All rights reserved.